It's April 1994 when Kurt Cobain retreats to his home in Seattle. To millions of fans, he's the biggest rock star in the world. But behind closed doors, he's fighting a battle no one can stop. With each passing day, the people closest to him grow more concerned. But then, everything changes. This is the harrowing story of Kurt Cobain's final days. To understand the final days, we have to go back further than Seattle. We have to go back to Rome 2 months earlier, because what happened there is where the final chapter actually begins. It's March 4th, 1994. Cobain and Courtney Love are staying at the Excelsior Hotel on the Via Veneto, one of the most recognizable streets in Rome, lined with luxury hotels and outdoor cafes that had been frequented by the international film industry since the 1950s. Cobain had been deep into Nirvana's In Utero European tour. He was sick, genuinely physically ill with bronchitis and laryngitis, but the tour had continued regardless, because tours do not stop for the people at the center of them. That morning, Love wakes to find him unconscious beside her. He had taken 50 Rohypnol tablets, washed down with champagne. She calls emergency services immediately. Italian paramedics work on him for several minutes before he is transported. It takes 5 hours of treatment to bring him back to consciousness. The official statement released to the press that day describes it as an accidental reaction to a combination of prescription tranquilizers and alcohol. But it wasn't accidental. A note was found in the hotel room, never fully released publicly, that those closest to him did not read as a medical incident report. Cobain would later tell people directly that Rome was a suicide attempt. The music industry absorbed the story and moved on within 72 hours. There were tour dates to reschedule. There were magazine covers already in production. There were business decisions that required him to be alive and functional. And so that framing took precedence. What gets buried in all of that is the scale of what Rome actually represented. A documented, deliberate act that was reclassified as an accident because reclassifying it was more manageable for everyone, with a financial stake in what came next. He was 27 years old and lying in a Roman hospital bed, and within days, the conversation had already shifted back to when Nirvana would play again. He flew back to Seattle to recover. Within 2 weeks, the people closest to him had decided that recovery was not going to happen without direct intervention. Back in Seattle, the situation at the Lake Washington Boulevard house had become impossible to ignore. Cobain's heroin use had escalated well beyond anything that could be functionally managed or concealed. His weight had fallen to approximately 115 pounds. People who saw him during this period described someone who was physically present, but increasingly unreachable. Someone you could speak to without being certain anything was landing. He had been hospitalized earlier that month in a separate incident, placed on an involuntary psychiatric hold after another reported overdose. That hold would become significant later. On March 25, 1994, a formal intervention was staged at the family home on Lake Washington Boulevard. It was organized partly by Courtney Love and partly by the management structure around Nirvana, in consultation with an intervention specialist. The attendees included Courtney Love, Krist Novoselic, Dave Grohl, Danny Goldberg, Nirvana's manager at Gold Mountain Entertainment, Pat Smear, who had been touring with the band as a second guitarist since 1993, and several others from Cobain's extended professional and personal circle. Dylan Carlson, his closest friend in Seattle, the person who knew him longer than almost anyone, was notably not invited. The organizers felt that Carlson's own relationship with drugs made him too close to the problem to be an effective presence in the room. By multiple accounts from people who were there that day, the intervention was painful and largely one-sided. Cobain sat through most of it in silence. He did not argue, did not defend himself, did not push back in any visible way. He agreed eventually to go. He was flown to Los Angeles and checked into Exodus Recovery Center in Marina del Rey on March 30th, 1994. Exodus was not a celebrity vanity clinic or a luxury retreat. It was, and remains, a serious dual diagnosis treatment facility, meaning it was specifically equipped to treat addiction alongside co-occurring mental health conditions simultaneously, rather than treating one while ignoring the other entirely. This distinction mattered for Cobain, who had been self-medicating severe chronic stomach pain since his early 20s, pain that had never been satisfactorily diagnosed or treated, and that heroin had, at least initially, genuinely relieved. He was assigned his own private room at Exodus. He met with therapists daily. He participated in group sessions. He ate in the communal dining area and, by multiple staff accounts, was cooperative and polite throughout his time there. He smoked cigarettes in the courtyard. He spoke to other patients. He called Love from a payphone on the facility grounds on at least one occasion and told her he loved her, and Frances Bean. On at least one occasion, he climbed a tree on the facility grounds and sat in it. A detail that feels small until you understand it as someone testing the perimeter, physically and psychologically, from the moment he arrived. He also seemed, by the accounts of people who spoke with him directly, disengaged in a way that was difficult to precisely describe. Not hostile, not disruptive, just absent, like someone moving through a process they had already decided would not apply to them. What nobody at Exodus may have fully appreciated was that Cobain had been through detoxification before, more than once. He understood the clinical rhythm of it. He knew how to occupy the space without being changed by it. On April 1st, 1994, his second full day at the facility, he walked outside into the facility's courtyard in the early afternoon. He climbed over the perimeter wall. It stood 6 feet high. He told another patient as he was going over it that he was heading out to get something to eat. He got into a taxi, went directly to Los Angeles International Airport, and boarded a Delta flight back to Seattle. He used a false name on the booking. When Love realized he was gone, she contacted Tom Grant, a former Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputy who had transitioned into private investigation work and had recently begun taking on clients connected to the entertainment industry. Grant began his search immediately. He spent the next several days methodically working through Seattle, hotels, friends' addresses, known locations, phone contacts, anyone in Cobain's orbit who might have information. He came up with nothing. He would later say, in multiple interviews and in his own detailed, published account of the case, that he worked the search as thoroughly as he knew how. He checked everywhere except the one place that should have been checked first. Cobain had gone home. The property at 171 Lake Washington Boulevard sits in the Denny Blaine neighborhood on Seattle's eastern edge, a quiet, tree-dense enclave of large homes set back from the water, the kind of street where neighbors maintain a respectful distance and ask few questions. The house itself is a substantial Tudor-style property that Cobain and Love had purchased earlier in 1994 for $1.13 million. Behind the main house, accessible by a separate path through the garden, sits a detached garage. Above the garage is a small greenhouse room, glass-walled, fitted with French doors opening onto a small, upper balcony. Cobain used it as a personal retreat within the property, separate from the house, separate from the people in it, the one space on the property that was entirely his. That is where he went now. What he did during the days between April 2nd and April 5th is reconstructed from a combination of confirmed facts and partial accounts from people on the periphery of those days. We know that on April 2nd, he visited a pawn shop and attempted to purchase a handgun. The purchase was blocked by an automated flagging system. His recent involuntary psychiatric hold had placed a temporary legal restriction on his ability to buy firearms in Washington state. He contacted Dylan Carlson and asked him to make the purchase on his behalf. Carlson later said he believed Cobain needed the weapon for personal protection, given the volume of obsessive fan attention the Lake Washington property attracted. Fans who would climb fences, peer through windows, and camp on the street outside. Carlson bought a Remington Model 1120 gauge shotgun from Stan Baker Sports on Lake City Way on April 2nd. He delivered it to Cobain that same afternoon. We know that at some point during that week, Cobain called his attorney, Rosemary Carroll. He asked her to locate the most legally airtight boilerplate language available for removing a spouse from a will. Carroll later said she found the call alarming and did not know how to act on that alarm in the moment. We know he spoke to his mother, Wendy O'Connor, during that final week. She later recalled that he told her he had no reason to live. She told him not to join that stupid club, the so-called 27 Club, the loosely defined pattern of musicians who had died at that specific age. Cobain was already 27. He had turned 27 in February. We know a neighbor reported seeing someone matching his description near the greenhouse at some point during that week. We know food was delivered to the property on at least one occasion, ordered by phone. We know the main house appeared unoccupied from the street, no lights visible, no movement, no sign of habitation. Tom Grant continued his search throughout the week, following leads that opened into nothing. Love worked the phones from Los Angeles, calling hospitals, precincts, county jails, emergency rooms across the Seattle metro area. On April 7, 1994, she filed a formal missing persons report with the Seattle Police Department. It was logged and processed. It's worth pausing on that for a moment. A missing persons report had been filed. The police had a name, an address, a description, a history of psychiatric holds, and a recent suicide attempt in Rome that the public record had quietly reclassified as accidental. The report sat in the system. No active search was initiated. The following morning, Friday, April 8, 1994, a 24-year-old electrician named Gary Smith arrived at the Lake Washington Boulevard property. He had been contracted to install a new security system in the main house. He parked on the street, walked the property to take a preliminary look at the job, and noticed something as he came around toward the garage. The light inside the greenhouse room above it was on. He looked through the French doors. He walked back to his van. He used his radio phone to call 911. The call was logged at 8:40 in the morning. Kurt Cobain had been dead for approximately 3 days. He was 27 years old. The King County Medical Examiner formally placed the date of death at April 5, 1994. A 3-page note was found near the body, written in red ink in a gardening sketchbook, addressed in its opening lines to Boda, Cobain's childhood imaginary friend, a figure he had spoken about since his early years growing up in Aberdeen, Washington, whom he described in interviews as the companion who was there during the periods when he felt most isolated and most himself at the same time. The note opens with a Neil Young line, "It's better to burn out than to fade away," and then immediately, pointedly, disputes it. Cobain calls the sentiment something a self-satisfied old man would reach for. He describes his inability to feel the thrill of music the way he once had, not the performance of it, but the feeling beneath it, the thing that had originally made creating it worth anything at all. He writes about feeling like a fraud in front of people who were experiencing something real that he could no longer access. He references specifically a concert in Munich on March 1, 1994, the last show Nirvana ever played, and the 20,000 people in the hall, and how standing at the center of that had produced nothing inside him. The final section of the note is written in a visibly different hand, smaller, more compressed, as if written at a different time, and is addressed directly to Frances Bean, his daughter, who was 19 months old. He tells her she has a good life ahead of her. He tells her she will be good without him. On April 10, 1994, a public vigil was held at the Seattle Center Flag Pavilion. Approximately 7,000 people gathered in the open air. It was organized in under 48 hours by local radio stations following the announcement. Love did not attend in person. She remained in Los Angeles, but she sent an audio recording that was played through the PA system to the crowd. In it, she read sections of the note aloud. She also departed from the text repeatedly, addressing the crowd directly in a register that was raw and unfiltered, and unlike anything a memorial service typically contains. She told them to be angry at him. She told them to say he was a fucker for doing this. She was both furious and devastated simultaneously, and made no attempt to separate those two things. 7,000 people stood in the open air and listened. It was not a conventional memorial. In the weeks that followed, Cobain's body was cremated. No burial plot was purchased. No headstone was commissioned. No cemetery received his remains. The decision to cremate came quickly. The question of what to do with the ashes did not resolve quickly at all, and in some ways has never fully resolved. A portion was taken to Olympia, the city in western Washington, where Cobain had lived in his early 20s, where he had worked dead-end jobs and written songs in his apartment, and felt, by most accounts, most like himself, before the scale of Nirvana's success made ordinary life structurally impossible. Those ashes were scattered at McLean Creek Nature Trail, a quiet forested walking path in Tumwater, just outside Olympia, winding alongside a beaver pond through second-growth Douglas fir and red alder. There is no marker at McLean Creek. No plaque has been installed. No interpretive sign identifies the location. If you visit today, you walk the same trail that any other visitor walks, through the trees, past the water, back to the car park at the end. The creek has no idea it is famous. A second portion of Cobain's ashes remained with Courtney Love. In 1999, a journalist traveling with her on assignment noted that she was carrying some of the ashes with her in a pink knitted bag shaped like a teddy bear. She said she was not ready to not have them close. In April 2014, exactly 20 years after his death, a portion of the ashes being stored at her Los Angeles home was reported stolen. The LAPD confirmed the report and opened an investigation. No arrest was ever made. The current location of the remaining ashes has never been publicly confirmed. There is no grave to visit, no inscription to photograph, no coordinates to type into a map. For most people who feel the loss, the story ends not with a headstone, but with a question that has no clean answer. Where exactly do you go when you need to go somewhere? The consequence of no grave is a specific kind of grief, one that cannot consolidate around a fixed point and so spreads outward instead, finding its own architecture from whatever is available. Veretta Park is what was available. The bench there has never been officially designated as a memorial by the city of Seattle. It carries no plaque, no marker, no city signage connecting it to Cobain, but it has functioned as a memorial for more than 30 years because the people who needed a place to go needed somewhere to go, and this bench, 2 properties down from the house on Lake Washington Boulevard, was the closest they could get. If fans have been writing on it since 1994, Park's maintenance crews sand it back to bare wood at intervals. Within weeks, the writing returns. It comes back in different languages: English, Japanese, Portuguese, German, Spanish, French, and others. It comes back from different decades of people, those who were alive in 1994 and remember where they heard the news, and those who were born years afterward and arrived at his music through an algorithm or a parent's record collection or a scene in a film. Flowers appear on April 5th every year without any organized coordination. Someone always brings them. No announcement goes out. They simply appear. And so we end where we began, back on this bench in Veretta Park, the tree line visible through the fence, the roof line of the house beyond it, the greenhouse above the garage still standing exactly where it stood in April 1994. The house has changed hands since then. The street continues to be a quiet street.